Hello, my name is Ildiko,
And I'm Phil.
and this is the My Open Source Experience podcast, where we discuss all the things about the mechanics of open source in business and in communities. Follow the podcast on your favorite platform and check out the latest episode on Season 3. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the My Open Source Experience podcast. I am super excited. We have Wolfgang Gehring with us today, and with him, we will dive into open source in the automotive context. And you might think that automotive industry is a place where open source might be a little bit harder to do. So today we will explore whether or not that is true. But before we do that, Wolfgang, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself to the audience, like what is your tech background and what do you do currently?
Thank you very much, Ildiko. So my name, you already mentioned, Wolfgang Gehring. I'm from Germany. I live in Ulm, a city with three letters, ULM, in the south of Germany. It's kind of tucked in between Ulm and between Stuttgart and Munich. It's where Albert Einstein was born. You've heard of that guy. So that's what Ulm is famous for. So I work for Mercedes-Benz Tech Innovation, which is a 100% subsidiary of Mercedes-Benz Group. And I think everybody knows Mercedes, right? My background in tech, so I studied computer science and I studied math, and then I worked as a software engineer for several years. Also, when I joined Mercedes, which was, 17 years ago? And no, 18. I think now. And I started as a software developer and then went on to become a project manager and then Scrum Master later. And since I think 2017 or so, I'm the open source guy, or one of the open source people there.
Do you remember when you first learned about open source, like the concept of open source, and maybe even started to use open source software?
No, I don't actually remember when I heard about it the first time, because now, so as I said, I studied computer science, in the 90s, and so open source was already there. And I mean, I spent countless hours installing a distribution of Linux on my computer, so that was, I guess, my first touch with open source. What did I think about the concept? I don't know. It was there. It was great. The idea of collaborating was just there. And then, when you're young and a student and you work with all kinds of people, and then it's the idea to work with people that you don't even know is kind of exciting, right?
And do you remember when you got involved? Like, was that when you were already working for Mercedes, or already around school?
So, I mean, other than, at university, working with open source tools, when I got involved at Mercedes, I clearly remember that, because so that must have been 2017 so I attended a conference in San Francisco, and it was called the Lean Startup Conference. And so it wasn't actually even about open source, but you could visit startup companies in the area to see how they work. And one of those startup companies that I visited was a small company you might have heard of. It's called GitHub. And back then, they only had a few hundred employees, and they talked about how they work and what they do in open source and inner source. And I was really inspired by that. And I said, okay, look, we need inner source at Mercedes as well. And while we're at it, we need open source too, because, we at that time, we hadn't really used open source much at all. And so I started advocating the usage of inner and open source practices after that. So after that conference, and I wasn't the only one. There were other people like me, of course, and our voices grew louder. Let's put it this way.
I'm excited to dive into that. So, for example, Phil and I, we have a chunk of our career. Well, Phil's is bigger than mine in the telecommunications industry, and like that is another industry that is highly regulated, working a lot with standards, strict rules, and regulations. So, when you want to venture out and try something new, then your hands are very often tied. And there are people who are excited about new ideas and are encouraged by them. So they will explore how to either get around things or rather untangle things to enable something like using and investing in open source. And there are other people who are less open to the idea of doing something that they haven't done before. And as far as I saw, the automotive space is very similar, obviously, because that's another highly regulated area. And as software is eating the world, it very much is eating the automotive space. Last week, I was in Texas and I saw quite a few of these self-driving cars as used, I think, as taxis or something. And you really don't want those to fail because big traffic, and if something goes wrong, then there are a lot of people who can get hurt, and no one wants that. So maybe the flexibility is not there as much as when you're trying something new for a web shop. In terms of like personal injuries and those kind of things that you need to be looking out for. If I understood correctly, you said that like you've been with the company for 18 years, but it really was around 2017 when this idea of using open source and maybe eventually getting involved in open source really started to take place and shape within the company, right?
Yes, that's correct. So I would say, I mean, there were people advocating it before, slowly, but it was kind of a grassroots movement at first. It started more and more people talking about it, and it's like, look, you really can't do anything sensible anymore today without open source. We have to look into this, and we have to see how we can use it and adapt it, and so that was about 2017, 18. I would say, let's say 18, yeah.
So before then, the company wasn't even using much open source software, to your knowledge.
Exactly, that is correct. We weren't using open source libraries in our own software development. We said, no, not so sure about open source. Let's not do it until then, But then the grassroots movement became bigger and bigger, and also our leaders, I mean, they fortunately listen to what people have to say, and so we told them, look, it's really this is something we have to do. We have to do open source, and so then we discussed this, and so one of our advocates of open source, he had a very close, direct contact to our CEO and CIO, and he was able to convince them. And so that was really cool. That helped us a lot, And then they said, okay, look, we're listening. We are listening, and we are understanding what you're saying. So let's talk about this, and let's see how we can do it. And then, then at some point, it was taken over into the official IT strategy, and it was taken over and okayed by the board of management. And then, of course, the work began. Then they said, okay, look, you wanted this, now you have it. Now let's do something with it, and you work on it, right? So that was really cool. That was like, yes, we can now. Okay, and then we sat down, and we have to figure out what we do, yeah, and how.
Right. And that constitutes all the governance and everything else that you need to figure out how to manage it. I've seen, from outside that the automotive industry, because it's shifting so much more into software, that just facilitates, right, the need to really engage in open source. In the telco space, where I currently am, we have some projects that are very industry specific, right? How are you managing what we call network functions, right? So these different features that happen inside of a telco network, and how do you orchestrate them so that they're where they need to be in the network? Those are kind of specific to the telco industry. But we also, as an organization, are actively engaged in platforms like Kubernetes, where the folks that are doing enterprise and hyperscale type of things, pretty much everything that they're doing is inside of a data center, whereas we really care about secondary networking and how do you talk between data centers effectively, and broadening out that wide area network from a technical perspective. So when we come to the platform of Kubernetes, it's telco specific features that are needed in the platform that are missing, that we're really focused on, right, and adding. And so I'm just curious, are there analogies in the automotive industry where you're either industry specific stuff that everybody in the automotive industry is kind of working together on some pieces of software, and other places where there are platforms where everybody on the planet is using it, but you're doing it so that it's got a smaller footprint so it fits in the car or whatever, right? Those types of other technical requirements that you're bringing into those common platforms. Can you talk a little bit about, where you see the focus for the automotive industry and for Mercedes-Benz there?
Yes, so absolutely. So there are several initiatives and working groups, but what I would like to mention as the biggest and most promising one is the software-defined vehicle working group, which is hosted as a working group within the Eclipse Foundation. So we're a strategic member of the Eclipse Foundation, as well as strategic member of that working group. And that working group really has now, I don't know how many members, but like more and more, it's growing bigger and bigger. And there are now a lot of players from the automotive industry and beyond, actually, working on software-defined vehicle things, so that I suppose would be the equivalent of that. And there are several initiatives, again, within that working group. One of the latest one is called S-Core, which I think is going to be fantastic collaboration, where really players in the automotive space get together to develop things now together. I think that's going to be fantastic. And then there are some others. There's also automotive grade Linux. There's just for mentioned for completeness, and several others. But for us, I think right now European automotive industry, not just European actually. So yeah, I would say SDV, Software Defined Vehicle Working Group, is the most promising one.
I know that Mercedes has a FOSS manifesto. For someone who'd never read the Mercedes-Benz open source manifesto, like, what should they envision that is in the manifesto? Like, what it is targeted to achieve, and roughly what the contents of the manifesto are?
The Mercedes-Benz FOSS Manifesto is a set of guidelines and core values with regard to open source that we believe in, and which sends our employees on their open source mission, knowing full well that they are supported by the company to do that, right? And so it has three parts, and the first part is a preamble, and so that's sort of in order sort of to set the stage, to give it, well, a solemn note, and to say that we are fully committed to the manifesto. If you've seen the Lisbon Treaty on the European Union, that also has a big preamble. And so we kind of model it after that, just, in a slightly condensed version. It just says, this is what this is about. And then the second part is the company's principles and the employees' principles. And so the company's principles say that from a company point of view, and it says, we support our engineers. We want them to go on open source mission, and we encourage them. So, for example, working time. You do this in your working time. It's not your private time, of course. There are laws against that. Also, if the company benefits from it, then obviously it's working time. And then the employees' principle. From the employees' point of view, they say, hey, before you write custom code, why don't you go and see if there's anything already available in inner source or in open source? It also has a paragraph on please learn through open source. Maybe go to a conference. That's in the manifesto, right? Also, please be engaged with open source. Engage yourself with inner source. And also, one of I think that's the last one, that says, mini code of conduct. Remember that how you behave out there in open source reflects back on the company. So, be nice. And so that's basically it. Yeah, preamble, company's principle, employees' principle. Be a good open source citizen, basically.
Not every company has it. The last automotive company I heard of was Porsche, I think, who also has a manifesto. Do you know why it was important for Mercedes to have a manifesto and really state those points to advocate for open source?
And so, see, the thing is, so now we were at a point where we had the strategy. FOSS was in open and inner source were in the strategy, and people started to work on it and talk about it and so forth. But it wasn't really picking up as much as we had hoped it would at the beginning, right? And of course, news always travels kind of slow in a big company. And so we felt that we had to do something a bit more radical than just having it on some slides, And because at the time also people were still asking us, so am I now allowed to use open source? Am I allowed to contribute back? What's the situation here? Can I publish stuff of my own as open source? And so we wanted to tell people, yes, all of the above. And we wanted them to give something they could reference, and not, the CIO mentioned it in his talk, and it's probably on some slides, but I'm not exactly sure. So we wanted to give them something that they could reference and they could use, and that would give them the security to, yes, look. And so that's why we wrote the FOSS Manifesto. And it's not just allowing them to do this, it's actually actively sending them on the mission, on the open source mission. And so now they can reference this and say, look, it says right here, I should engage in open source activities. I should do inner source and things like this, right? So that was the idea behind it. And so at first, we only had it in Mercedes-Benz Tech Innovation, in the subsidiary. But then I was able to show it to the CIO, and he said, "Oh, that's amazing! I want that for the whole big Mercedes Group company." And then so we published it as for the Mercedes Group, and then this was okayed by the board of management, so by Ola Kelenius and the other directors up there, and so that was basically the go, because then now everybody can say, hey, look, it was acknowledged by the board of management, and so now it's a thing.
I was just starting to wonder that whether or not it was complicated at all to put the manifesto in place, or as you were just describing, it sounds like that the understanding was there company-wide, so it sounds like a smooth ride, but maybe it wasn't.
It was smoother than you would think, so it was really, like, as I said, we had it first in our Mercedes-Benz Tech Innovation, and then I showed it to the CIO of the big group, and he said, I want this for the big group, for everybody. And then he took it to the board of management, and they okayed it. And so it was actually pretty smooth. Then after, for a while, we got questions like wait, have you asked every manager on every level if they're okay with this? And I said, you know what? Ola said it's okay, so I guess it's okay. And then they said, oh yeah, I guess that makes it okay. So it was really nice. And then I started talking about this. I was very happy that we had this in place, and I started talking about this at conferences and so forth. And so you just mentioned Porsche. It was the Continental Automotive company were the first ones to adapt it and publish their FOSS Manifesto as well. And they said, thank you, Mercedes, for the inspiration. And we put it under Creative Commons zero license, so that everybody can use it and alter it in any way, and they don't have to credit us, and they can just do with it what they want. And then so far, several other companies have followed. So Siemens were the next ones, I think. And then after a while, it was Porsche. And we have Deutsche Bahn, the German rail company. And then Cariad, which is part of Volkswagen, they have their open source manifesto, as well as ETAS, who's part of Bosch. And then Inditex, which is a Spanish big textile company. And as well as the latest editions were SAP, this German software giant, SAP, they took it last year as well. And the latest editions were ZF. It's also a very big automotive company in Germany. And one more. Let me think. Toyota. Oh, duh. They were just a couple of weeks ago. Just a few weeks ago, my open source contact colleague at Toyota said, "Hey, look, we have a FOSS Manifesto now." I was like, "Excellent, man! Really cool."
So you got that in place within the company. Do you recall changes that you can attribute to the existence of the manifesto? Like, how did it change how the company was working, and did you start to see the benefits of having that document that says that yes, you can and you are encouraged to engage with open source and all those things?
Yes. So I like to think that it had a positive impact within the company. I can't prove it, because we don't have any metrics or KPIs that find out, did somebody make a contribution because of the manifesto. But so what we started hearing more and more, and still are hearing, is that people say, "Hey, we should publish this as open source. Look, we have the FOSS Manifesto, and it says right there, do this." Or people say, my boss challenged me for devoting time to open source contributions, but I told him, "Look, it's written in the manifesto that we're supposed to do this," and so more and more people or say, "I wasn't sure if I could," and then somebody showed me the manifesto, and I was like, "Oh, okay, amazing," So I hear stories like that still, that people reference the manifesto and say, "Look, we have this." And now, funnily enough, once other companies started publishing their manifesto, which was inspired by ours, then, internally people said, "Oh, look, if Siemens has a FOSS manifesto, then it must be a cool thing, or if SAP has that now, then it must be something good." Yeah, it looks like that. Yeah. So, it was funny. We got inspired back by other companies publishing their manifesto, which is also cool. So I think, yes, those are the main benefits, I would say.
I love that. I mean, I worked in a huge company myself, and like when the employee numbers are above 100,000, then there's no way that whatever that gets to every single person who works there. And once I joined the Open Infra Foundation, I also experienced talking to a person at a large company and asking them if they knew another person at that large company, and they're like, "No, I'd never heard that name." So much of the job became introducing people to each other who worked for the same company, but never even knew the other person existed. So I can definitely see how people will learn because of how you opened up the manifesto, and other companies got the inspiration, and not just the inspiration, but also a starting point where they could start building their own. So it's pretty cool.
Right. And so just one more thing, I guess one of the main benefits is the public commitment, that says, "Hey, look, we as Mercedes believe in open source." And so that's like, other people outside have told me, "This is amazing. This is really cool. We love that you're supporters of open source." And also we've had, people that applied for a job and said, "We saw your manifesto, and we saw your public work with open source that somebody at a conference talked about, and I would not work for, as an IT person, I would not work for a company that doesn't do open source. So that's also one of the good benefits, I would say.
So if I understand it correctly, you're saying that it's not enough to have a manifesto and have the high level and C-level management sign it and say that yes, this is what we believe in, but it made a huge difference that it was public. So it was publicly stated that the company has the manifesto and that this is what you are following as the organization as a whole.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I mean, open source is about talking in the open about things, right? So, yeah.
And it was interesting the way you described the value that you got from others like SAP and I'm sure Toyota is going to be in that list as well, right? As others inside of your company see others outside of your company adopting something that you actually kicked off multiple years ago. It's almost like a crossing the chasm, right? It's like it's something that used to be different and potentially scary to, well, look, if everybody's doing it, then it, those others also doing the public manifesto make it easier for your company because it's just more common, it's more industry wide accepted. So
Yes,
it's almost like a chasm crossing that is helped there.
I like that chasm. Yeah, exactly.
How was the experience with management? Like you were talking about product owners, and also convincing the CIO, CEO, that using open source, inner source, and also giving things away for free is sometimes actually a good idea and is beneficial for the company. What was the process to get through the management chain and help people understand all these concepts that they may or may not have known before?
The management in IT, again, some of them are IT people. They're also maybe a bit faster to understand the technological aspects and why this is good. But in other parts of the company, of course, we had to do a bit more talking. So, talking and motivating, showing why it's necessary to engage in open source. I mean, one thing is, using open source, that's kind of a no-brainer, right? I mean, you get good quality stuff for free, so everybody understands that. But then they're like, yeah, okay, but why should we invest time to contribute back? And then, there are a lot of reasons, but one is, it makes us better because we learn so much, or because we can try to influence projects in our interest. And you don't want to be a freeloader, you want to give back as well. And so lots of reasons why that makes sense. And that maybe, is not something that is automatically or immediately clear, but when you explain it, then people will understand. Yeah. Now, the thing is, I told you it started as a grassroots movement. At the same time, we had the air cover, and that's really what you need to make something happen. And it trickles down from above, and it grows from the bottom up. So if you have both top down or bottom up, then that's a good way to really get through the whole company and every management level too.
What can you give an example of the top down? What did that look like? Was that the CEO mentioning open source in a newsletter? Was it some VP of engineering, advocating, hey, this is something that's important to us? How did that look?
So, for example, our CIO at the time, he was very much a fan of open source, and we have now a new CIO, Katrin Lehmann, and she as well is a very big fan of open source. So they do mention it a lot, like at town hall meetings, in their official strategy slides, in all sorts of meetups and stuff. They say open source, you people. We need open source. And so it was in all kinds of communication formats coming from the top. And so that of course is extremely helpful.
And they advocated both for using open source as well as investing in those projects that the company was starting to rely on.
Yes, both. I mean, mainly they said open source because various reasons, right? But you know what? So just this is last year. Forgot the exact month. It was in the fall. Our CEO Ola Kelenius, he was at in the southwestern state of Germany, Baden-Württemberg. We have a big, strong automotive industry, and there was a meeting at the government of the state, and there's it's called Strategy Dialogue in the Automotive Industry. And one of the focus points there at that meetup was open source. And so Ola Kelenius, as well as the executives from Bosch and Porsche and the university, they and the Chamber of Commerce, they signed a letter of intent to strengthen the role of FOSS in the automotive industry. And then so there's even Ola Kelenius, our CEO, signed that letter of intent. And then he was also in an interview that was on television, and he said, hey, open source is like a community. When you get something, you also have to give something back and invest in it. And a sentence like that coming from the CEO, that was super, super valuable and very helpful. And so we were very happy that he said that, on television. We're like, oh, Ola said it. Amazing.
That's awesome. I'm getting goosebumps. This is so exciting.
No, but it was really cool. So one of our, or a few of our colleagues from our Center of Competence for FOSS, they were there, and then, it was really good.
What forums do you use to get all internal ambassadors and coordinators and center of competence folks together so that they can share what's going on and opportunities and challenges that they're seeing across the company? Are there forums for them to get together?
So we have a chat channel on Teams, but as the most important thing is we have every 2 months we meet with the FOSS coordinators, and then we give them news, what's going on at the OSPO level, and then we ask them also, like, what's going on in your business unit? Do you have any concerns? Do you have any questions? Do you have problems? What should we talk about? So we exchange with them at least every other month, every 2 months, for with such a direct format. And then, of course, there is the chat where they can engage and ask questions.
Just something that I've started doing with Ericsson. We have the policy folks that do that. But recently I've been trying to get the developers inside of Ericsson to know each other, because I've got lots of developers in different teams who are engaging in different open source projects. And then you always get the, gee, I've got a problem over in this project. Is there anybody in Ericsson that actually works on that? So that they have an in to that community, with somebody who's already engaged in that community. So making sure those guys know who each other are and what they're working on. So I've been trying to build a network on the developer side as well. You guys got anything like that as well, or?
The developer network?
Yeah, forum. So literally every other month, I get these folks together and they just present on what they're doing in the upstream, right? Because I've got folks working in the upstream.
We have a lot of exchange formats like that. It's like so many that you kind of lose track, to be honest. It's a bit difficult. So for open source, that's the one thing. And then we give out newsletters, or we write articles and things like that. But for developers, there's also several formats where they get together, or we have tech talks, or yeah, we have our FOSS Friday. Have I mentioned FOSS Friday? No, I haven't.
No.
FOSS Friday is an internal conference series where we invite speakers, external or internal. Tends to be a bit more external speakers, and then they give us tell us something about an interesting open source project. And so that's for example, Daniel Stenberg was there from Curl. or in last week we talked about SDV, the software defined vehicle stuff, and so lots of cool projects and things, and so that's once a month, and that's also a place where people go and get new inspirations maybe for open source stuff.
Is it like company wide so people know that it exists, and if they have time and interest, then they can show up and listen to the presentation, ask questions, engage?
Exactly. It's open for everyone at the company. Does everybody know about it? See, that's one of the challenges. I mean, we've been doing that for years, and still sometimes people say, "Oh, I heard about this FOSS Friday." I'm like, "Why do you only hear about this now?" But so yeah, it's open for everyone, and we also record it, and then somebody who can't make it at that particular time can still watch the recording.
Cool.
That's pretty great. I think I heard similar things happening in other companies as well. Like some people organize, like, I don't know, these coffee morning meetings where people can come, and it's a bit like office hours, I think, in a way. Sometimes there are presentations or like a kickoff of a particular topic. Sometimes I think people arrive with their questions if they are newer to the concept of open source / inner source. These seem to be working well. Different formats, but again, the point is to connect people and share knowledge.
Yeah, we also have FOSS consultation hours twice a week, where somebody who has a question about anything regarding FOSS or compliance or whatever, they can just show up and ask. And that's actually kind of nice. We started out with one slot per week, and because it was quite popular, then we have another one now. So I think that's helpful for people also, because a lot of times you write an email and then you get an answer a week later or so. That's not very satisfying.
Yeah.
And so we have that slot, and also emails, ping pong 10 times back and forth. A lot of times it's easier when you just talk to somebody for 5 minutes or so.
Before we depart, Wolfgang, can you please tell us something about yourself that has nothing to do with tech, nothing to do with open source, maybe not even cars, some kind of a hobby or a fun fact?
So, hobby. I love scuba diving. Um, that's one of my great passions, and because it's just amazing what you see underwater. It never ceases to amaze me. I just got back from a scuba diving trip, and I saw two octopus. And I mean, I've seen them before, but just to observe an octopus going from one underneath a rock to another part of the reef, and like walking on the ground, or like, I'm not even sure how to describe, melting on the ground and transitioning. And while doing that, changing its color multiple times and its shape, to look like the surrounding reef or rocks. That is just one of the most amazing things.
It's mind-boggling, isn't it?
It is indeed mind-boggling. So every dive, almost every dive, you see something that is just fascinating. You're like, wow, that's amazing work. And Ildiko, maybe you should try it out as an introvert, because it also, when you're down there and you just hear yourself making bubbles and breathing, has a meditative part to it as well. It's very soothing and relaxing, and you're weightless in the water. It's really cool. Yeah, I love it. I love to travel, by the way. Just that's another big hobby. For um, vacation. I just got back from Oman, where that dive was with the octopus. And Oman is an amazing country, really, really nice, great landscape, super friendly people. And again, traveling, you learn so many new things. There's nothing like it, right? Yeah. Fun fact: so my deepest dive to date, but that was without scuba gear. That was inside a submarine. We went to 2,000 feet below sea level, so that's 600 meters. And that is an entirely different world down there. It's obviously dark, and but you have your headlights, and I mean you see weird things like really, there's this fluorescent tube, kind of wafting through your field of vision, and you're like, what are you? Are you an animal or a plant? It's really weird creatures down there. I can totally recommend that. That was really mind blowing as well. Yeah, fascinating.
Where was that?
That was off the coast of Roatan, Honduras, an island in that belongs to Honduras, and so it was down there.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a top one place where you went diving and you're like, this is the one?
So that's a difficult question because there's so many. I mean, so I would say my top three are probably the cenotes in Mexico and Sipadan, which is off of the Borneo, very small island there. That was, oh wait, now I'm missing a third one. I don't know. There's so many other cool places. Roatan is my third. That's deep to my heart. I spent some time there, and that's really amazing.
And what about places that are still on your bucket list?
So I want to go to Papua New Guinea sometime. That's on my bucket list. I want to go to, actually, I should say it differently. I haven't been everywhere, but it's on the list.
Nicely put.
Yes.
Yeah, I've done the Great Barrier Reef out of Cairns, Australia. So, and that was again similar to the Papua New Guinea trip, I'm sure. And yeah, it was a 7-day live aboard. It was outstanding. Yeah,
Amazing.
And with that, that's all, folks. That was our episode for today. We want to hear from you. Please leave comments under the episodes that you watched. Share your feedback and share your experiences to continue the conversation. And let us know what topics you would like to hear next. Stay tuned because the next episode is just around the corner.